whenever you're doing a video, or if you're doing an on-stage presentation, or if you are going to be doing a boardroom presentation, if you're standing up in front of your child's kindergarten class and you have to remember to say something, when you have to try to remember what you say without going off on a tangent or really just spilling words coming out of your mouth that make no sense, and you really don't want to hold note cards or have a PowerPoint in front of you, these are some of the simplest techniques that will be able to help you to do that. Now, I've been a public speaker now for, well, about 20 plus years. I've been doing public speaking, being in front of trade shows, as well as doing boardroom presentations to doctors, selling them $500,000 x-ray equipment. But more so, the strongest level of public speaking and where I got my experience, or should I say my 10,000 plus hours, is when I started to become a presenter, training people for fitness certifications, and that was way back in 2000. So I don't think that you're ever an expert. I think that you can always become better. So I just want to share with you my quick tips on how I'm able to do that. Now, for me, to give you an idea of how I like to speak, is I don't like to use words. I don't like to hold note cards. I really think that the best trained speakers are the ones who don't use note cards. It's a distraction. So anytime that someone is on stage or you are watching them speak and they're holding note cards, first, they can get lost in what they're saying, because when they complete what they're saying, they then have to look down at their note cards and figure out, okay, where was I? Where did I leave off? And it's an interruption in the flow. But the other side of it all is it's fumbly, like to constantly fumble with note cards and flipping through to figure out where you are. Let's jump into PowerPoint presentations. So many times it's very common for people to use a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm a fan of PowerPoint presentations, but to a different level. The reason why I don't really like to use PowerPoint presentations is because when you as the presenter put up a long lines of words of things that you want to remember to say, you're actually distracting your audience, because your audience, more times than not, is feverishly writing notes. And if you put up a slide that has a ton of text on it, it doesn't matter what you're saying, because all they're doing is writing. They're just writing. They're seeing what's up there, and they want to make sure they write it before you switch the slide. So they actually aren't even listening to you. So that's the reason why using words all on PowerPoint actually is not effective, because your audience isn't listening to you. So it's actually more effective if you are going to use a PowerPoint presentation to use maybe simple words, like one word words, or pictures. Pictures are actually one of the better aspects to use, because that will give you a reminder of what to say when that slide comes up or when that picture comes up, but you pretty much are ad-libbing in a practiced way. So rarely should you, as a speaker, or if you're doing video, have an idea of what you're going to say, have that bullet point, and then just figure you're going to ad-lib while you're doing that. Now, I'll be honest, I do that myself, much like I'm doing right now. I have an idea of what I'm going to say, but I'm ad-libbing through it. Now, I can kind of get away with that because I've been speaking for so many years that I do have a thought process of how to actually deliver information easier that way. But if you're fairly new with delivering training or tutorials, you might want to make sure that you put your bullet point of what you're going to say, and then jot down the exact points of what you want to make sure that you say within those points, and then practice it. Run through it, practice it a bunch, because that will definitely help you be a lot more streamlined and get your points across. All right, so let's get into some ideas of how can you be a better speaker. Let's say you are going to be doing some scopes, you're going to be doing videos for YouTube, you're going to be doing some Facebook. Really, you have to practice to become a better speaker. It really is practice. And the only way that you can do it is, of course, making sure that your points make sense, but that you've gone through it multiple times. But now it's the big day. You're going to open up and do your first scope, or you're going to film a video and you only have a certain amount of time to film it and you don't have all day. You can't edit it a ton. How can you make sure that you remember what to say? Even if you're standing on a stage with thousands of people in front of you and you are not using note cards, you're not using a PowerPoint, how can you remember what to say? I want to go through and help you with that, but before I go through and give you my simple technique on how you can remember to do that, let's go through some questions. So if you have any questions, make sure that you put them right there, and I will comment and read your comments, and of course make sure that I can answer some of those as I get going. Also, write down what you want to make sure that I go through to help you with some of the obstacles that you have when you do any form of public speaking or video speaking. I want to make sure that I can answer those questions for you. So if you have one, make sure you put it in the comments, and then I would suggest that you actually copy it before you post it, so that if it doesn't get seen, you can always paste it again, and I can of course see it again and answer that for you. All right, so it looks like you guys are pretty good to go. All right, here we go. This one's going to be really short and sweet, and it's going to make it so easy for you to be able to go and be more effective on video. So we've got some good questions coming up right now. Do you record yourself when you practice, and how do you get rid of the ums? I get distracted by people's facial expressions. Oh, these are fantastic questions. Looking at the camera and the audience. All right, let's start going through some of those questions. I already got a couple in my head. Let's start with, how do you avoid saying too much? Typically, is a filler word. A filler word that doesn't mean anything, and it's a searching in your mind to make sure that you're on track. Saying too much is a matter of practice, experience, your 10,000 hours, but how can you avoid it? Here's an easy way to avoid it. Start recording yourself, and then go back through and start listening and keep account of how many times you say is very distracting, and it's very amateurish as well. And not saying that I've never said because I still say but the quantity that you say it really details your confidence level of your material as well as your experience. So the only way to get out of saying and so is by practice and by continuing to do it. Don't worry about putting content out there where it's not perfect. There's learning lessons in the whole process of it all. So just start putting content out there and just work to get better, because then you'll only get better with that. So how can you get rid of it for sure? Honestly, one of the best ways that I found for myself to get rid of some of my filler words, which my filler word is and. I say and. So I'll end a sentence and then I say and as I move into the next one. One of the ways that I've been really working to get rid of that is by my podcast. So I have a podcast, The Platinum Edge, and I go through and edit the podcast. And I try to get rid of some of the long spaces. So sometimes I will delete if I'm thinking too much in between spaces, or if I annoyingly said and. I will try to get rid of some of those. So if you start to go through some of your video or audio, and if you're editing it, you will quickly work really hard to not say it any longer. Now, if you want to be a professional, of course, it's about practice and making sure that you continue to be better. All right, so our next question was in regards to, again, help me out with your questions. Someone said, don't say say it when you get nervous. Of course, you're going to say that when you get nervous. What were the other questions that you may have had? I can't put too many in my brain, or I'll just forget them. This brain can only hold so much. Right before you go on, how do you deal with the nerves? Some of the greatest techniques that you can do when you are going to speak on stage, or say you're about to do a presentation, be it super simple, like you are just going to the school to speak in front of your kids' class, or you are actually going to be doing a business presentation. Anytime that you have nerves, you have to look at it as you're just excited. You've got the butterflies, you're really excited to do this, you're excited to share your information with people. That's what nerves really are. It shouldn't be out of fear. So we confuse fear with the excitement, and when we're about to go do something on stage or on video, we really just want to do a great job because we're excited about sharing that information and also having the opportunity to be able to speak to someone. That does feel like scary nerves. Multiple different techniques on how you can handle that. But again, the more often you're going to do this, you will get better with it. Now, I continue to have nerves or butterfly or excitement before I go speak. So just recently, I had to speak to 26,000 people on stage. And of course, that would seem like a pretty scary aspect of what to do when you are going to speak. You want to make sure your information is good. Now, I wasn't really nervous about going out to speak because, again, I've been speaking for so long. So the act of being in front of people and speaking on stage and having everybody stare at you, that doesn't scare me. I've gone through and dealt with that. What really was my butterflies were making sure that my point came across, it was clear, and that I remembered exactly what I wanted to say. So that's what I was most nervous, if I'm going to use that term, about, was making sure that I got through my material, that I didn't go over my 20-minute allotment, because when you're a speaker, you never want to go over your time. But I really wanted to make sure I did a good job. That was my big butterfly moment. So again, just getting out there and really making sure that you do that. So again, getting other questions that we want to put on there before I get going in some more of those techniques. Thank you so much for letting me know that, Jody. That's so kind of you. Do you walk around or stay still? And how about speaking while teaching fitness classes? So when you are actually speaking, that's when you're speaking, to stand perfectly in the same place is again about experience and training. So for years, I continue to work to be a better speaker. I will again never claim to be perfect. I feel that we can always improve our skills. So fortunately, for years, as I said, I've had 10,000 plus hours speaking by running certifications, by doing fitness certifications for people, training, team, business. I've had many hours, depending, of course, on what you are training and the space and utilization that you have. You, of course, want to move as much as you can. Now, this is, of course, a lot of a different technique that I can, of course, go into in a different topic, because specifically what tonight's topic is about is how to remember it. So the movement is another topic that I can cover. But just to give you food for thought, is if you do stand perfectly in the same place and still, it's really going to be hard for your participants to be able to connect with you because you're inanimate. You are still, it's hard for you to make a strong point, a memorable point, as well as to exude energy when you are perfectly still. And that's a scary place to be. And a lot of people will stay still because they're just nervous about moving. Me, I'm a very animated person. I use my hands a lot. I use a lot of grandiose movements, and I put a lot of energy when I do speak. So when I do speak, I'm actually exhausted when I'm done because of the movement. I would avoid being a pacer, of course. So the biggest tips are not pacing, going back and forth, because then you just look like a lion trapped in a cage and you're just nervous about trying to get on out. But really, it's about making point. You want to move to one side, speak to the people in that side of the room, and then, of course, you want to move to different sides to be able to speak to different people. Eye contact is going to be a critical point with that. But my biggest word of advice for that is when you are making a very strong point, make sure that you plant your feet, best if they're shoulder width or wider, and say your point so that people will firmly remember it. So if you're walking around and you're saying something that's really important and you're walking across the stage or wherever you're in the room, and it's a really important point that you want them to remember, they're going to forget it because the movement, it's a distraction. So if there's something that you really need them to remember, you need to stop, slow your rate of speech, and deliver the content in that sentence so that they'll remember it. And then you can move again. It's all about that pacing and energy. That's another great topic that I can, of course, cover in another time. So what I want is your questions on memory, on how to remember what to say when you're doing videos, as well as on stage. What if you lose your train of thought? That's a great question. All right, so let's go through that then. What do you do if you are, say, doing a video and you really don't want to have notes around and you don't want to edit so much? You want this to be a one consecutive live take. How do you handle losing your train of thought? Now me, I am so guilty of being a dog with shiny things. I can easily be distracted, or a story pops up in my head and I start telling this story, and then before you know it, I'm like, oh my gosh, where was I? Many of the times, what will remind you is an anchor point of where you were before. So if you are, say, for instance, using PowerPoint and you have an image up, you can look back to that anchor point and it may bring you back. But if you're in a video, you can, of course, take that opportunity to stop and then look at your notes and then come back in. Here's a quick tip. So for instance, if I'm doing a video and I really don't want to have it look like I'm reading notes to be able to do my video, what you want to do is if you lose your train of thought and you start to get off on a tangent, and then before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm on a tangent, where was I? Your best tip is to finish your sentence with a smile. Try to stay in your same thought. Pick out your notes. Look to see where you're looking at. Put it down. And my next tip is, and that's an edit point. So if you're not looking around and moving things and looking all sad, it's hard to edit. Always end a sentence with a smile and start a sentence with a smile, because then if you have to edit, it's a streamlined edit point. But say this is a live presentation. How do you do it? If you don't have the ability to joke it off and say to someone, like if it's a small business meeting, where was I? What were we talking about? I am like a dog with shiny things. That's what I say. So when I used to run certifications and I totally forgot what we were talking about because I went off on a tangent, I'll just make fun of myself. Like squirrel, like seriously, and say, what were we talking about? I am totally like a dog with shiny things. And someone will remind you. But if you don't have that opportunity to ask someone to remind you what you were last talking about, you just have to pick up with your last strongest point of topic and move from there. And if by chance where you left off comes back in, you can interject it and say, oh, I forgot to add this on that last part. So that's a way to handle that. All right, any other questions on remembering what to say before I give you my solid techniques that are going to help you remember exactly what to say in all video presentations, lecture presentations, everything that you got going on? Any other questions? Squirrels get you every time. For sure they do. They get me. I got dogs staring at me right outside in my office right here too. So I'm like a dog with shiny things. Any other questions you got before we actually go through my little techniques? I'm actually going to show you by using my house as an example. So I do have to move the camera to be able to show you exactly what I'm going to be talking about. Join your local Toastmaster. That's definitely a great one. Anthony, I know that was you, Mr. Love 357. Definitely, Anthony, I agree. Toastmasters is one of the best that you can do for learning how to speak more efficiently and to have your thoughts organized. When we would train our new master presenters, that would be the tip and suggestion that we would have our master presenters do when they first started speaking, because it was probably a new task for them to be able to speak to people for training purposes. And Toastmasters was one of the critical steps that you can find anywhere. You could Google and you'll find a Toastmasters anywhere. One question was about speaking in front of fitness classes. If you're teaching a group fitness class, that is actually one of the easiest ways to remember what to say. I mean, it's choreography depending on what the class is that you're teaching, but remembering what to say for your choreography, you can use notes and put them on the floor and just big black marker or whatever so you can easily see it pop up the white page. That's one tip that you can do. But when you're ad-libbing in fitness classes, the best and easiest way to fill the blanks is to always fix form and technique. One of the easiest equations is to deliver the move that you're going to have them do by saying it. And then your next is to help them understand a better application of the move, either by fixing form and technique or giving them tips on how to get a better use out of it. And then the third thing that you can always fill in is then the motivational cues. So those are usually the rhythm of when we are speaking in group fitness. Deliver the move, then give correction or better application of the move, and then the final part that you could fill in the blanks with are motivational cues, and then you're probably on to the next move as well. All right, any other questions about remembering what to do? Because I want to, of course, start to give you the idea of exactly how to remember, and then I'm actually going to show you by showing you within my house how to do it. Any final questions? All right, so let's go through. So how can you remember exactly what you want to say? And I'm just going to say this is like you're doing a video. So imagine that you are creating a topic where you want to film a video, you don't want to edit, you want it to be a one-take wonder, and you also don't want to use notes. How can you remember what to say? My first bit of advice is while you're in this practicing mode to remember how to be a better speaker, do shorter videos. So even if, like this topic could be a monster long topic, but I'm really only going to deliver to you one critical step of action that you can do that's going to make a big, huge difference. But this could be an hour-long training if I wanted it to be, but I'm not going to do that to myself. I'm going to only deliver it in small chunks. So my first tip is whatever topic that you are going to be creating a video for, don't think that you need to create a college course on it and then deliver that whole course within the same video. You can, of course, have the main topic and then divide it up into chunks. Just like we were just talking about now with someone talking about, well, how do you move when you're talking? That's another part of public speaking. So yes, I'm talking about public speaking in general right now, but there's so many different avenues of that all I'm talking about is a smidgen of how do you remember what to say. So my first tip, dive deep into a very small part of the topic and then just do that much. So keep your videos short, especially as you're working to build your following. Try to keep your videos 3 minutes or less because you'll get a greater watch and following, because people always start a video and then look to see how long that video is. Everyone wants to watch short videos and get nuggets. So that's why I'm working to keep this one short, because of course I want to make sure it's nuggets for you. Okay, so the next thing that you want to really work on is first write out your bullet points of what you want to say. So whatever your topic is, I personally make sure that you actually hand write them as opposed to typing. And the reason is the way that our bodies naturally work when we are visually looking at something and we are kinesthetically and we're writing it through. The action of writing those words and visualizing it, you actually deposit it more in your head, that you'll remember it more, as opposed to typing with your thumbs or on the computer. So get out some white paper from your printer, get out markers or whatever. But I like to use markers because just that big fat deposit of ink really sinks into my brain for me to remember. That's why I always do things in big markers when I need to remember something. Hey there, Chantel. So that's my next tip, is to make sure that, of course, that you write down your bullet points in the order that you're going to deliver it. Best if you just pick 3 tips. So if you have one small topic, pick 3 tips and write down the bullet points. So the opening of what you're going to say, why it's important, a story that's relative, and then the 3 points that are going to be your teaching points. And then, of course, at the end, you can wrap it up and reiterate what you just said so that they can remember it as well. So now that you've got those 3 main points that you want to make sure that you remember. Now, within those main points, what I'm going to suggest that you do is actually go through and write down your teaching points within those main points. So for instance, if you're teaching a point on how to effectively plant a sunflower, your first step will be to dig a hole in the ground. And that's your first bullet point. From there, in that bullet point, you need to explain to them, well, how do they dig a hole in the ground? So you might need to explain the tools that they'll need, how deep they're going to dig the hole. Do they need fertilizer? So basically start writing down your main point, but then the little points of action. Try to keep it methodical so that it goes in a chronological order as well, because that will work for your head if you can kind of visualize it. So that's my second big point, is to write it all down with big fat markers and pens or whatever you need to, colorful pens, because then it just sinks in your head. Your third step of trying to remember what to say is practice. Practicing it over and again, exactly how you're going to introduce yourself, which if you have a hard time saying your name and what you do in the opening, that's going to be a challenge. So make sure you at least have something that's simple and people can grasp right away if they're going to continue to watch your video. So what I do is I like to do, of course, a lot of video on Facebook, and I found out that many times I have a 50% drop off of people watching my videos after 10 seconds. So after 10 seconds of them watching my video, I've already lost 50% of the audience. That's typically been the mark. Now that is typical on a 1 minute long video. But if I put like a 30-second video up, then I'm going to have a longer retention of people watching for a greater amount of time past 10 seconds because the video is only 30 seconds long. So that's the same thing when you do your opening, for when you are opening up, say for a video or a lecture, is make sure that when you introduce yourself or the topic that you're going to be talking about, it's clean, it's concise, and it's digestible so that people know right away who you are and exactly what you're going to deliver. and if you're worth their time to stay. That's really the critical thing is, do I want to stay for this episode? That's that point. So now practice, 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 practice. So that's my fourth step. And the fifth and final step is imagery. This one is the one that will help you really remember what to say. And that's where I'm going to have to walk through my house, but it's getting a little dark, so you may not see my house too well. But basically, you are going to tie in the bullet points of whatever you're teaching to things you can see visually in your house. So if you were standing at your front door and you opened up the door, that's your opening, right? So the front door in your mind is the memory of say your name and say what you're going to talk about. So the door of your house is that. You can visualize that and you know that I can't forget that because that's the door. So now when you open up your door, what is the first thing you see when you open up the door to your house? What do you see? Is it the couch? Is it a table that's on the side wall? Is it a picture? Is it a grandfather clock? Is it a staircase? What is it that you see every time you open up your front door is the first thing you always see? Because guess what's going to go there? Your second main point. So for instance, the door is your opening, your name, what you're going to say. So now you open up the door and you see the staircase. That's what you always see. So tie whatever your topic of second point is to the staircase. So now your third point, as you move and walk through the house, what is the next thing that you see as you walk through the house? Is it your couch? Oh, so if your couch is always what you see, that's your anchor point. That would be your third point. So that when you are going through your presentation, be it on video or on stage, all you're doing is tying in that connection of imagery that you already knew you walked through the door and you know you already talked about the staircase. So now the next thing that you always see is the couch, and you tied in the couch, your third bullet point of your topic. So all you're going to do is tie what you visually see in your house with those bullet points that you won't forget those bullet points. So again, to recap, as I wrap that all up, that first point is making sure that you've really gone through and practiced. You've got your opening and you have bullet point written them out, as well as put the points within each of them. You've gone through and practiced multiple times, and you've connected that imagery with each of the bullet points so that you will remember exactly what you have to say. So before I walk through my house and give you an idea of exactly what I was going to say here, any questions, any other questions that you might have on how you could do that? And I'm just going to go through and show you what I would see if I'm trying to remember what to say. Awesome. Thanks so much, Jules. Is it Jules or Julie? Perfect. Glad these are helping you to make better videos as well, because that, of course, is going to translate in any area that you speak. It's not a matter of always thinking that you have to be on stage to speak. You can be on video. And video is, of course, one of the strongest ways to be able to build your business. Oh, ready to see my crib. Okay. Let's see if the dogs are going to get all over the place. I've got two labs. One is Rocky. We named him Rocky. He was our first dog when we moved here from Rochester, New York. We are outside of Dallas, Texas now, but we moved and we called him Rocky for the abbreviation Rochester Rocky. And then we got our second dog, girl, Lab, and I named it after my Doberman Pinscher that I had when I was young, and her name was Fifi. So it was kind of like crazy to have a Doberman Pinscher named Fifi, but we did. And so I named my second dog after her, but she's crazy, crazy. And I'm like, oh, why did I put Fifi's name on this crazy dog? Oh, from Syracuse. Cool. All right, so let's just go through, and I'm just going to show you kind of imagery. I'll flip the camera as I get out to my house of what I would see so that I can visualize and put points on of exactly what I want to make sure that I remember. So let me get this up. I'm going to be losing my light because I have a little bit of a ring light here. So we're moving out of my office here, and I told you. You guys want to say hi? That's Rocky. Hi, Rocky. Where's Fifi? Fifi's got scars on her face because the dog's next door You see that scar on her side? Attacked her. All right, so, oh, hi, what are you doing? My daughter. Okay, so I'm just gonna go outside. What? Fifi, no, inside. Rocky, Fifi, oh, this is great. Dogs outside. Rocky, inside. Oh, a nice pony. Rocky, Fifi, now. Oh, great. See what you guys did? Now they're outside. Oh, there's Rocky peeing. Rocky, come on. This is not a good idea. Don't do this on your scopes. Stay inside. Okay, I'm going to flip the camera. Stay. So, stay. That's the dogs. Okay, so here we are. So you just have to imagine that you have dogs staring at you. And this is your opening. So this is where you would be saying your name and what your topic of your video or your lecture is and how it would apply to them. So as you first walk into your home, like I would see, the first thing I see is my staircase. So I would tie my second point of the staircase. So for me, I would actually probably put the topic of my video and exactly how it's going to improve someone's life, make it easier, or what they're going to get out of it. Okay, so then come on in, I'm shutting the door, I don't want the dogs out. So as I come through, the next thing I would see here is this stand here. So again, you just tie it to a connection of exactly what would you see, and this stand, to me, would be my first teaching point, right? It'd be my first teaching point of exactly, if I was talking about videos, what are the strongest steps of remembering what to do? It would make sure that you have, number one, practiced. Thank you. Let's keep it going. So now as I go through, see there's a big fat couch. So that I would tie a second point into because I would remember exactly what my second point would be for that presentation of speaking. And then if I look to the right and I would see a fireplace, I would tie a third point. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Let me flip this. Oh my gosh, these guys are great. So let me go back into my office here so I can answer more questions as we've wrapped this up.